Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. My name is Hussey. The night it happened, he could still remember every sound, every flicker of light, and every mocking laugh that followed her cruel words. It wasn't just a casual evening with friends. It was supposed to be a celebration, one of those warm gatherings where laughter fills the air and people feel connected. Instead, it became the night his world shifted. She stood there, not as the woman he had loved for years, but as someone he could barely recognize. Her lips curved into a sharp smile, and her voice carried across the room as she mocked him in front of everyone. Every word she spoke was like a knife, deliberately aimed to wound. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just stood still, his face blank, though inside something was quietly breaking apart. What hurt wasn't just the words. It was the betrayal behind them. She knew his insecurities. She knew exactly where to strike to make him feel small, unworthy, insignificant, and she did it deliberately. Their friends laughed awkwardly, some uncomfortably, others too eager to follow the energy of the room. She basked in the attention as if it were some grand performance, never realizing that she was destroying something she couldn't rebuild. He walked home that night without speaking a word to her. She thought his silence meant defeat, submission, or perhaps a man too weak to react. She had no idea that silence could also mean calculation. It was a kind of silence that wrapped around wounds until they stopped bleeding, the kind that didn't scream or beg for justice, but slowly, quietly, began to build something else, something sharper. In the following days, she moved as if nothing had happened. She laughed at breakfast, scrolled through her phone, and talked to him with the same casual tone she always used when she believed she had the upper hand. But something inside him had shifted. For years, he had been the one to overlook, to forgive, to smooth over her sharp edges. He believed love meant enduring, and so he had endured. But now, every smile she gave him looked different, like a mask. He began to observe, not confront. He paid attention to every small thing, her habits, her phone calls, the way she suddenly grew distant after certain messages. He noticed how she began taking longer trips to visit her friend, how she avoided eye contact whenever he asked harmless questions. Before that night, he might have ignored these details, choosing to believe in the woman he loved. But after what she had done, he saw everything clearly. What she didn't know was that their lives were built on more than emotions. Years earlier, they had bought property together. They had shared investments, accounts, and assets that tied their lives far beyond their marriage vows. He had always trusted her to stand by him. That trust was the foundation of everything. But now, he no longer saw her as a partner. He saw her as someone who would tear him down if it gave her power. And he was no longer the man who would let her. She thought she had humiliated him and walked away unscathed. But he had already begun to move pieces she didn't even know existed. He started meeting people quietly, people who knew how to handle property, contracts, and the fine print that most couples never paid attention to. It was in these quiet meetings, behind the mask of everyday routine, that he began planning a different kind of response. Not with anger, but with precision. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He listened. He learned. He found the little cracks she had never noticed, loopholes in the agreements they signed, weaknesses in the ownership titles she didn't understand. He carefully arranged for small legal steps that seemed meaningless at first, but piece by piece built something powerful. Meanwhile, at home, she grew more careless. Her late-night calls became bolder. She believed he was still that quiet man she had mocked, the one too soft to fight back. She had no idea that he had already started building a wall around himself, a wall she wouldn't be able to break through once it was complete. The first sign she noticed wasn't anything big. It was a single letter addressed to her with words she barely understood. She laughed it off, tossing it aside. She didn't realize it was the first thread of a net tightening around her. The house they lived in, the place she believed she would always control, had slowly started slipping from her hands. He never argued about it. He never explained. He let the legal language do the talking for him. Their friends who once laughed with her noticed something changing. He began carrying himself differently, not louder, but firmer. There was something in his eyes that made people think twice before mocking him. She noticed it too, but by the time she did, she was already entangled in something she couldn't quite name. Then came the day she crossed another line. It wasn't enough for her to humiliate him once. She began doing it more frequently, as if his silence was permission. One evening, during another gathering, she let another cutting joke fall from her lips. This time, though, the laughter didn't sound the same. Some of their friends looked uncomfortable, even sympathetic toward him. She didn't notice that she was no longer the star of the show. She was becoming the villain in a story she didn't realize was being written around her. What she didn't know was that behind her back, he had quietly changed the future of every shared asset they owned. Slowly, carefully, he arranged the documents so that control shifted away from her. She believed she had him cornered emotionally, but legally, she was standing on quicksand. Weeks turned into months. She continued her secret affairs, thinking he was too blind or too broken to notice. But he noticed everything. He had known from the moment she started coming home smelling like someone else's perfume. He had known from the way she locked her phone. But he didn't rage. He didn't confront her in the way she might have expected. He simply let her weave her own trap. She thought love had made him weak. In truth, it had made him patient. One evening, she returned home to find the locks changed. The house that once echoed with her laughter now felt colder, distant, unfamiliar. She called his name, anger rising in her chest. But he didn't answer. On the table, she found an envelope, not filled with angry words, but with legal documents she could barely comprehend at first glance. It was only after reading them slowly, line by line, that she realized what had happened. He hadn't just taken a house. He had quietly positioned himself in a way that gave her nothing. The properties she believed were theirs were now legally his. The accounts she thought were shared were secure beyond her reach. She had mocked him publicly, but he had dismantled her world silently, one legal step at a time. For years, she had relied on the belief that he needed her more than she needed him. She thought she held the power because she was louder, because she controlled the social circle, because she knew how to hurt him with her words. But power doesn't always live in the loudest voice. It often hides in silence, in quiet steps that no one notices until it's too late. She called him in a panic, her voice trembling. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the papers in the air as if they would change. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at her with the calm of a man who no longer feared her storms. "You embarrassed me once," he said softly, "but you built your whole life on things you didn't understand." It was the first time she saw the real cost of her arrogance. She had laughed at him that night, never realizing she was setting fire to her own future. All the little jabs, all the public humiliations, all the careless betrayals. They had built this moment. She had no home to claim, no assets to lean on, no leverage to fight with. The man she had mocked for being quiet had outsmarted her without raising his voice. Her pride was loud, but his silence was louder. She tried to fight. She hired lawyers, tried to twist the story, painted herself as a victim. But the truth was written clearly in every contract she had ignored, every document she had signed without reading, every decision she had let him make while she was too busy believing she was untouchable. While she had been busy chasing attention, he had learned how to secure his future. She had underestimated him, and now she was the one left standing alone. It didn't end with a dramatic confrontation. There were no screaming matches or violent scenes. There was just an emptiness, a quiet realization that everything she thought she owned had never truly belonged to her. She had spent years treating him as if he were disposable, but she was the one who had lost everything. In the weeks that followed, she tried to piece her life together, but it was like trying to rebuild a house with ashes. The people who once laughed at her jokes kept their distance now. Some pitied her. Others avoided her entirely. Her pride had crumbled, and with it, the illusion of control she once had. He, on the other hand, didn't celebrate. There was no joy in watching someone fall, even if they had tried to destroy you. But there was peace, cold, quiet peace. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe without the weight of her cruelty pressing down on him. She had taken his dignity in public, but he had taken back his power in silence. She would spend the rest of her life remembering that night. The night she laughed at him in front of everyone. She would remember how it felt to be untouchable, and how that feeling slipped away without a single shout from him. Because sometimes the loudest revenge isn't in words or fights. It's in quiet actions, in patience, in letting someone destroy themselves while you build a future without them. She thought she humiliated him, but in the end, she only revealed the strength of the man she had underestimated. And that was how her life quietly unraveled. One signed paper, one ignored detail, one cruel word at a time.